on this computer. Lovely. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so you're still anyway quite COVID post-COVID feeling.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Yes, it's
Yeah.
not been great. How's your C4 going, Jenny?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'm just writing up my like I've done the lit review, I've done the voice, the first voice, and I'm on the second voice now, but it's just time consuming writing it up. Are you writing yours up or have you done that?
I've just finished my voice 3
Right.
this morning, actually. Yeah, I found it really hard to narrow it down as to what to actually put in.
Yes. Yeah. And I find as well that later on they repeat things. And so you're going,
Mm,
I'm sure I've said that already. So I've ended up having to highlight bits so that I can go back to the paragraph and go, have I already said that? Because I'm repeating
yeah.
myself otherwise.
Yes, it's definitely time consuming, isn't it? Working out what those actual loud voices are.
Yeah. And also,
Mm,
though, I was just speaking to Owen, who's one of my colleagues studying, and he said he and Kyla, they're doing it together. They're doing a voice recording to share their voice, if you know what I mean. And I thought that would
yeah,
be a lot easier, wouldn't it? Like just to talk
good
about the
idea.
interview. I
Mm,
don't know why I don't think of these things. Because the other thing is that because I've written them, what I'm also doing then is sending it back to the person that shared their voice and saying, are you happy with this? And then
yes.
waiting for them to come back. Whereas if I did it verbally, I wouldn't check what
Yeah.
I was saying. So I'm kind of happier that I am checking, but it's a lot longer and slower.
Yeah, yeah. But I think you're right in terms of that voice sovereignty. You have to be really careful that you are staying true to what they've actually said, because
Yeah.
that's
Because you have to
important.
rejig the sentences sometimes, don't you? And you think, have
Mm,
I lost what the sense of their meaning? Has that gone now because
yeah.
I moved the sentence around? Yeah.
So what did it tell you? What
Oh,
did
it's
you
interesting.
learn?
So I've done one voice was my bilingual support person, a Russian lady, and she's the mum of children, and she was basically saying it's too hard to teach. You can teach them the basics of the language, but keeping it alive at home is just too hard because we don't have enough time, and she feels it delays their English development. And then I interviewed a girl who's grown up in New Zealand, and she was
Yeah.
Filipino, and she can speak some Filipino, so she's a similar level, and she prioritized English as well. But she's very much missing the cultural aspects and her language and wishes she'd managed to retain it more. But it does sound
Right.
like an incredibly hard journey. And I've kind of talked casually to people outside, and they've all said, yeah, it's too hard. It's too, you can do it as everyday conversation level, but not at
Mm,
a level where you could go and study in that country or something. And there was also the mum brought up a great point, which was about the purpose. And she said if she was going back to, if she was working here for 3 years and going back to Russia, and her children are going to go back with her, then yeah, keep it alive, keep it, going. But she said she's going to live in New Zealand forever. So she really questions the purpose of keeping the language at such a level,
mm.
And I think that's such an interesting point that,
Yeah, it
yeah,
is.
hmm,
It is an interesting point. This is not related to my topic, but is interesting. My husband's grandfather, he was Russian,
oh yeah,
and he moved to the UK um, many years after the Russian Revolution. But that was really the start of things because they were from one of those elite families, and they just faced all sorts of issues. And eventually, they fled, and him and his mother and siblings ended up in England.
mm.
And she spoke no English, and she did everything she could to make her children English.
Oh right,
And so he grew up, and he fought in World War II, and after World War II, he faced terrible racism because of his name. His surname was Kobolevsky, and he
right,
ended up changing his name to Kay, because of the racism. And although his mother had only spoken Russian, by the time he was an adult, he couldn't speak any.
no,
And when I knew him, which was in his latter years, he was relearning Russian, and he did his O level, and he was working on his A level
oh,
because he wanted to have that language. And he lamented the fact that he had abandoned for, there were understandable reasons, but they'd abandoned the language, him and his siblings,
Mm.
and that his children had no Russian identity and,
Yeah.
and understanding of the culture. And he took his children, my mother-in-law and her siblings, to Russia, and he wrote a book about the journey his family had had. So yeah, he came back to it in later life.
Yeah.
Um,
And that
wanted
does
to
seem to be a
reconnect.
pattern. I think that is a pattern that they
Yeah,
realize when they're older, but I think you have to have that age and experience to look back and say,
that's
actually,
right.
it would have been really
Yeah,
good to keep that going. Um,
yeah.
but then I think what she was saying, and I think she's probably got a point, certainly with like Russian, because you've got different alphabet and everything, haven't you?
Mm.
But if it's there in place and you've got the sounds of it and the language structures, you can do a little bit of it. You've got a lot there already that you can grow
You
from.
have.
Mm.
And I suppose you want to think about what's the purpose behind it. And if the purpose behind it is to be able to communicate with the wider family, because that would be my purpose. I'd want my children to be able to communicate with their grandparents. And that's what I can see a disconnect um in some families. In my previous role, there was a disconnect with the South African families and
Right.
their grandparents. Often Afrikaans went, um, and the children became English speakers. That was my experience there. So if your purpose is to ensure that you can connect still, and when you do visit, you can be understood, then just being able to speak that, day to day conversational, having those skills would be enough, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And this mother said exactly that. They talk to their grandparents in Russian, but if they want to talk in more depth, like about politics or something, then the mum will translate for them to because the
Yeah,
grandparents can't speak English. So they can do every day, but yeah, if it gets more specific, then they have to have some
yeah,
support. But otherwise, I think they manage. And she said, I get it that really the reading and writing is just encoding and decoding what they've already got. So they've got a lot already. So
yeah.
yeah.
So what next for you?
What do you mean? What's my community project going to be?
Yes, what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, where do you think you're
Well,
going?
they've all talked about reading books, how that can support language, because you have conversations around books, and about how you can do books from their country. So they've got the cultural
Mm.
aspects incorporated. So I'm going to look at teaching parents that. Have you done HPP? The
Yes, yes.
yeah,
We talked
that's
about
right.
that last time.
Yeah,
So
so I talk about
oh, that's
yeah
lovely.
doing that with the parents to sort of enable help them to have some period at home when they can do it. But I'm going to do a trial run first of all with a Kazakhstan lady and see how it goes before I jump in. But so how about you? Tell me about all yours because I'm fascinated. I'd never looked at it from that until you mentioned it, so your perspective. So
Yeah, well, since I saw you, I've collected my next voice, which was the students. And um, I'd say one slight barrier to getting all of the student voice was the fact that for some of the families, when you're sending a mass consent form home,
mm,
um, the fact that it was in English meant that for some it was a bit overwhelming.
mm,
So but I did get all of the children of the families who'd come to my focus group, all of them. So they're all new.
nice.
Um, they all signed up, and I actually got 64 students participate in my survey.
Wow, that's
Yes,
amazing.
I
Because
got a good
they really
voice.
want to talk about it. A lot of them are really happy to talk, aren't they? They want to share that experience, don't they? Because people
That's
just
right.
can't.
Yeah. And
Mm,
to keep it fair and equitable, it was opened up to all the students. So regardless of whether they were new to the school, but
mm,
to get their voice. And actually, the second largest group was students who'd joined in year five, and I was surveying year fives and sixes, so it worked really well. So that what they said was that they love. So I'm looking at engaging Fano, as you
yeah.
know. They love activities and events that their families can come to.
Oh,
They love
beautiful.
introducing their families to their teachers. They had great ideas for things we could do. They want social events. They want picnics. sporting activities where families join in, and so food here, people coming in cultural outfits, and then over here we're doing running races and egg and spoon and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some great ideas from them, but probably
Beautiful.
the biggest voice that linked back to my Fano focus group was that a large number of them say that their families can't come to events because of the busyness of their lives and their work commitments.
Yeah.
And that links back to the sense of overwhelm that I got as a voice from the Fano that came, and the sense of not being fully connected.
Yeah.
And so I feel like my next step is we need to help them actually fully connect.
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking of doing, and I've just been up to school and met with the principal actually, because it's one school I'm looking at. I'm thinking of producing a video that talks about school life,
Mm,
education, um,
beautiful.
the activities, the culture, the values of the school. I also want to include something about learning support. And I know this will grow, and I want it to have pictures of the school,
Yes.
and then the voiceover will be in different languages.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to have to learn how to use AI for the different languages.
Um, will you? Because you just have to put a different voice recording, surely, narrating the video. Would that, or are you?
What? So use parents.
Yeah, a parent, maybe a bilingual parent, yeah, who just reads the same script but in the different languages so that it flows across the video, maybe. I don't know. But that's such a cool
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. So then they would be given that. It'll either be on the website or will be sent out. And so it gives them that starting point. I also
Yeah.
like the idea of having liaison people to connect. But that's another idea. I think my main idea is around this video.
That's a
So
brilliant idea.
that's where I'm at. But like you, I don't know how it'll work. I'm not that technical. I'm going to have a lot of learning.
Yeah, and how to put the video together and things like that. That sort
Mm.
of but I imagine, yeah, once you've done it once, then you've got it, haven't you? You then just need different languages. But yeah,
That's right. Yeah, but it's
yeah,
so the next step will be, what languages do I want to focus on, or what do I want in my video, and
yeah.
how I'm going to put that together. So I think it'll be quite a big piece of work.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I think we'd often go for well, one of the most of, suppose there's a lot of Mandarin speakers, but actually the ones that need it the most are the minority groups, aren't they? Where there's only one or two of them because they've got no support around them.
That's right. That's exactly it. And so making the decision about what languages you would use will be really important.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But if you did link it to AI, I know that there's AI that will translate things. So even if there must be a way that you could then put that in
yeah.
and get a different translation. I don't know. I've got some obviously some research to
Yeah.
do.
And we do have, because I do the bilingual assessments, we do have access to a lot of different language speaking people who I'm sure if you
Yes,
gave them a script would read the script in their language, you know,
absolutely.
like that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, we would have people locally here too. Um yeah, so I'm excited.
Yeah.
So when have you got your next meeting for, because you've still got another voice to collect.
Oh no, I've got all my voices. I'm just
Got
writing up
all your
the
voices.
last one, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I'm just going to do this little trial run with this mum from Kazakhstan, she's Russian. And then
Mm,
and if that goes well, then produce a booklet or something to support parents and do some
yeah.
workshops with them and things. It's so nice when it actually excites you, isn't it? When you're actually
I
doing
know, I know,
something you're
yeah.
really interested in. I love what you're saying. And it does relate to what I'm saying because because what I'm finding is that when you start talking about, well, what's the solution? So you've got a child who, say, speaks Urdu or something, and who comes to school, and they might not have any other children who speak Urdu at school, and they're really isolated. And also there's, if there's no, they don't see their culture and the environment, then there's
Yeah.
like two worlds for them, isn't it? Walking two worlds. So I think what you've talked about would be lovely for my teachers to help build up those connections between home and school, develop a
Mm.
better understanding of the parents and the family and so forth. So those connections are there. Because I was doing this a bilingual assessment on a Mandarin boy, and it was so interesting because he was say his I did a teacher. He's really bright, but he's struggled to settle in. He's he's been here for a year, very limited English. His Mandarin is excellent. So his teacher, I did an interview, and the teacher was saying about how he had a really explosive nose, this boy, and he was snot everywhere. And they were saying, and he was being quite kind of cruel, really, about the amount of snot, and I think that's happened since he arrived. And this boy, when he was talking to me, we got Google Translate going, and he said, "Can you tell my teacher this?" And he typed in Mandarin. It came up um, congenital, what do you call it? Rhino, like basically the allergy you get, rhinitis. This is how bright he is, congenital rhinitis. Can you tell my teacher that, please? And obviously he'd gone through this whole process of being perhaps mocked, belittled, because of his nose. When he had an issue, he had a real problem, but he was
Yeah.
able to communicate that. Whereas if there was a strong link between the family, you know what I mean? I feel that that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And how would it have felt for him, the fact that he's already dealing with this and now he's feeling further isolated by it
Mm.
is just, of course, it's no surprise to us that he then was struggling to fit in.
That's right. And he's an only child, and he was saying a lot of the other children that speak Mandarin were born in New Zealand, so their Mandarin is much more limited. So I don't expect they'd understand congenital rhinitis either. And then also it turns out that the other Mandarin boys were bullying him. So, and he hasn't got the language to tell them he's being bullied. So I could see all of those issues. If there was a better connection between the teacher and the family and the school, the family would have been felt much more able to go into the school and say, this is what's
Yeah.
wrong. Because to
Yeah,
me,
no,
that's what's wrong with
definitely.
my child. That's why he's not been doing, that's why his behavior at school has been as it is, because he's had all these medical issues and he's being bullied.
Mm.
um, yeah.
But
So,
they obviously didn't feel able to do that. One of the things that that came out of my Fano focus group was that they would like, and I might have said this to you before, they would love to connect with the other parents in the class and
mm,
and know about the other cultures. Who
yeah.
else in this class is an Urdu speaker? Who else in this class is a Mandarin speaker?
Mm.
Um, and they were wondering if there was a way to do that through the Dojo app.
Yeah, yeah,
um yeah, something else.
yeah,
So I
because
did consider that as well, but I wanted to go wider. I
yeah,
wanted to go wider. So yeah,
yeah, and it's a
it's
huge.
exciting though,
It is.
isn't it?
I was going to say with the Filipino girl that I interviewed, she was saying that when she arrived in New Zealand, sorry, and she had nobody, she went into the school and she recognized a girl who looked Filipino, so they immediately connected and they could talk to each other. And she expressed how valuable it was to have that one person that she could connect with. And I mean,
Yeah,
she's in her 20s now. They're still friends. They're still best friends, kind of thing, because they've got
yeah,
that connection. They can rant at each other in their home language. So that initial connection when they go into school, I think is invaluable. Just somebody who
yeah.
similar to them. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because one of my questions to the students was, what helped you the most when you joined the school? And overwhelmingly, the answer was being given the right buddy.
yeah,
Um, and uh, as part of my liaison role, because I'm not doing this within my study, um, although it relates to my study, is sharing my results with the teachers
mm,
and giving them the students' voice back to them about what helped them. They
mm,
want they need a buddy who they can connect with,
mm,
and they need to know the routines and the expectations. They were less worried about knowing where things are. They want to know what they've got to do. What do you
Yeah.
expect of me? Because
Wow.
it's different.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. I guess they
So,
can copy the other children if they're getting something out of a drawer. I mean, although I've picked up children as referrals where they've said they're delayed because they take too long to go to the drawer, but I've just found out it's a language issue because they don't understand the instructions, so they're watching what everyone else is doing and
mm,
copying. But you're right,
mm,
it's those more inferred things or the more abstract things that they can't
yeah.
do. Mm,
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting, isn't it? But I agree, having that person that you can connect with,
mm,
somebody who is like you in some way.
mm.
Um, and obviously your girl literally saw somebody and thought, yeah, we might have something in common.
Yeah, yeah. And it
And that shows how important that role is if you're the teacher choosing a buddy for a
Yeah, because
child.
also there's the connection with the family as well. And
Mm,
they've expressed that to keep their language and culture alive, they need community connections. So you're helping to support a community connection there
mm.
for them. So it's
You
kind of
are, yeah.
than just that friendship. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that makes it quite a responsibility, doesn't it?
Say as long as they're not bullying them like my Chinese boy. Um,
Yes, yeah.
other one, why? Yeah, I don't understand that at all. But saying that, I from experience, I know that a lot of the new arrivals do get bullied because they haven't got the language to tell on the bullies or the understanding
Yeah.
of the culture and things like that. So,
They're vulnerable, aren't they? Because
mm,
they're perceived as different, even, if their home language is the same as they're different because they don't understand
mm,
um, the ins and outs of the school culture and life.
yeah,
And therefore, if you're different, you can be a target.
absolutely, yeah. And they've got the voice, haven't they? They can say what's happened and it was your
Mm,
fault, and um,
yeah.
and I was going to say actually, because after our conversation, I've now started asking or thinking much more about the kind of immigration process and the arrivals. So with this girl, I was hoping to talk to her parents because I thought it'd be good to see all their perspectives. And they said no, they didn't want to speak with me. And I think I kind of alluded to this in my email. Um, and they sort of shared that the whole process, and I get this, I don't know if you found it, when you're doing that immigration process, you've got your medicals and your forms and
Mm,
thing,
mm,
and you can be a little bit nervous that there might be something wrong, or there might be something you embellished a little bit. And I guess there is a language requirement as
mm,
well in that form. And I think they're a little bit nervous that then to start talking about the difficulties they had assimilating or whatever
yeah.
with the language, they're unraveling their entire immigration process and it could raise concerns. So they sort of shared that sort of a thing that you're quite vulnerable when you arrive in the country and you
Yeah,
want
you
to
are.
settle in and look like you're managing and do everything and not go back to that kind of or threaten any way or yeah, you're right to be here. And I mean, because when I applied, they wanted to know whether my English was fluent enough. So I sort of said, look, I did my degree in England, my teaching degree. And they said, okay, can we have transcripts or something to prove that the degree was in English? Now, when you go through all that documentation, it never actually says it was in English. It's kind of assumed that
Mm,
in England that it would be. But so that became quite a barrier for me. And I thought, gosh,
yeah.
you didn't speak English. Can you imagine? How do you prove your English language levels? That's,
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many barriers to it, aren't there? And
yeah.
with us, one of our children had been very sick at birth, and he was still taking medication. And
Mm.
they found a heart murmur, and we'd already arrived here, so
Oh,
we were doing our residency. We
mm,
came on work visa, and it held the whole thing up, and he had to go and see all these specialists, and
mm,
it was stressful. And we could speak the language,
mm,
and we had to pay for it, but we managed to do it. So I do get that.
mm.
And one of my uh published perspectives, I read this, I looked at this website. She's called Rosenberg, and she's American. she's educational consultant, and she talks about the stages. I'll send you the links. It's quite interesting. The stages of being of immigration, and how you go from being a cultural survivor when you arrive and you
Mm.
just don't understand anything, to actually being a cultural expert where you can support other people. And I found that was a really fascinating piece of work. So I'll share it with you
Thank
after
you. That would
this.
be really, yeah, because I'm definitely talking, those survivors who are now expert, but they're, or perhaps they're
Yeah,
further down, although a lot of them fear they've lost that
they
culture.
might not be quite at that expert level yet. There's 4 levels.
Okay.
And it's American, but you
Mm.
can connect it to the New Zealand situation
Yeah.
and setting, because there are challenges wherever you emigrate to.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you've got language thrown in, it's a massive barrier.
It is, eh? And you
Mm.
imagine, like, from your circumstances, if you went to another country speaking a different language and they said they'd like to talk to you about your experiences of coming in the country and completing all the paperwork, I imagine you'd be kind of going, oh, there was all that, so perhaps
Mm.
not. I mean, my middle daughter, we always felt was on the autistic spectrum. We never got a diagnosis for her because she was a girl, they kind of kept initially, because this was in the early 2000s, they said, oh, she wasn't enough like a boy autistic. But anyway, it turns out to be a good thing, really. But we were trying to kind of hide her. When we were doing our medical, the doctor said, oh, come in as a group and we'll talk to you all. And we were trying to hide my middle daughter, just don't say anything, don't give it away.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, right, I need a little leader, a little organizer. And he said, I'm going to choose you. And he picked her. And it was like, oh, no. And actually, she really rose to the occasion. And actually, because she's an organizer, she got us all, this is so and so, and did a great job. But we were really worried that if it went on there somewhere that there was suspected autism, that could hold up our process, and as
Mm,
it is now, she's thriving. She never got a diagnosis here either. And, but I can understand that worry. And if it was about language, health,
mm.
whether they'd filed their paperwork correctly or whether they'd been entirely honest on, there's things like that. That would be a real concern. And that would be enough for you to not want or feel very vulnerable when you got here and not necessarily want to share your experiences with
Absolutely.
people.
And I think that vulnerability lasts a long time. I
That's
don't know how many years you've lived here now, but obviously quite some.
18. I think you're longer than me. Were you not 2003? Did you say?
Yes, yeah, January 2003. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
21 years.
Yeah. So we were 2007 January. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm.
and and we're we're citizens now, and our youngest child was born here. So I feel that this is my place. But for a number of years when I was a resident,
Mm.
I probably didn't have that sense of security. And over years, this becomes your community, and you've given to that community. But that takes a long time, doesn't it, to feel that
Yeah.
level of establishment?
Yeah. And like you were saying as well, that thing about when they're working extra hard, you talked about the parents not being
Yeah.
able to connect. That's such a vicious circle, isn't it? And I
Mm.
totally get that now. Yeah. So that if we did do events, you'd have to do it in such a way that parents can go.
Yeah, so I when I started this process, I thought I was going to be arranging, some great big fun whole day event. And that's just not what the voices have told me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Although the children love the idea of these events, they told me quite clearly my parents are overwhelmed by
Mm.
these other things to attend.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's led me in a different direction. And I think that's really interesting. Um, and they said, didn't they, right at the beginning, you can't decide what you're going to do
Yeah.
because you don't know.
Yeah.
And you can't,
Yeah.
because you don't know what you're going to hear and
Yeah.
how you're going to link it together.
I just had a 10-minute warning, by the way. Yeah,
Oh, right.
I totally agree. And yeah, it's because it keeps moving, doesn't it? And like, yeah, your one with the
Mm.
event, I would imagine as well, because I didn't like those big events. I became a single parent quite soon after I arrived here because my ex-husband. And I
Oh,
didn't
that
like
must
the
be
events. If I
interesting.
spoke a different language, I don't think I'd want to sit like I'd be
Yeah.
worried about people talking to me, because like at my school, my kids' school, the principal would kind of tour around and talk to the families, and I would follow after her, sort of thing, so that I never spoke to her and things like that. So I imagine they would avoid as well. They'd be very avoidant just to avoid
Yeah,
those
yeah.
conversations.
And if you can connect to that having the same language. Yeah, I think much smaller events is the way to go. And I think that in terms of that, when I met with the principal today, yeah, he's in agreement. And it may well be that because they're looking at what they can do as a school. So they need to rethink, because they had this massive event.
Mm.
And what we discovered was that all the parents that came to my focus group, nearly all of them hadn't been to it. So
Oh,
they didn't go to the compulsory, it
mm.
was termed a compulsory event. They didn't go to that, but they came, and it was after school, but they came to a small meeting in the staff room during the working day
Oh,
when yeah. So that tells you
yeah,
something
that does.
about the need to build connection
Mm.
and how you want to
Although I
do
would have
it.
thought that would be more challenging because then there would be more emphasis on them talking, wouldn't? Yes,
And there
but
was.
yeah,
And it was. There were 10 people, but it was, from the form, from the consent form, it was about, we want to find out how we can help you and other people like you.
yeah,
And so that obviously resonated with them. It was about them
yeah.
and children.
It would be
So,
interesting to do that as a cultural group, like a lower language group, so that you could have a
mm,
translator in the room as well. Because I found that with the BAS, a lot of the parents initially feel they can speak enough English and they'll start talking. But when you start to really get in deeper,
yeah.
language runs out, and then they're using the interpreter. But they must be really constrained by how much they can share. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we did have one of the ladies brought a support person to help her
Okay.
translate, and that was really good. I was really pleased that she did that. It was a younger family member
Mm.
who lived in the country for many years, and so that gave that lady the opportunity to share
Okay.
her experiences. Um, but yeah, it's really overwhelming because they all had different languages, so they couldn't actually support each other.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and it's a challenge as the person leading the group. I found that quite challenging,
Yes. Yeah.
because you want to make sure that they have their opportunity to say what they want to say, but they understand what it is you're asking, and
Mm.
that you've then relayed what they said correctly.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
least when you send them, because I sent them the transcript of what was said, and then they can put it into Google Translate, can't they?
Brilliant idea. Yeah, putting it in writing is always so helpful, isn't it?
Mm.
That's why I love your idea of the video, because if it's got a narration going over it, and then maybe there are links afterwards to a transcript of the video or whatever, um,
Yes, yeah, exactly.
yeah, then although I imagine if there's subtitles, the subtitles will go into that language, won't they? So they probably get a transcript anyway. But I don't know
I
if,
hadn't even thought about subtitles.
yeah, I just
That
think
hadn't
if that
even.
would work on a video. I don't know. I don't know how. I'm not technical either, but
No,
um,
I don't know how I'll work subtitles. I'll let you know.
but don't they do it automatically? Can't it automatically? Because I know when I watch some videos, they kind of get the language wrong or they mishear things and they. So it's
Yeah,
obviously
that's
not the person
true.
that did it
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah,
Yeah,
you can set it like that. You'd
yeah,
want it right though.
but that'd be amazing because they can then rewind, watch it again, slow it down.
Mm,
They can do all those things. That's just such a
mm.
good idea. I'm sure that the school I work with would be really interested in what you've done there and would be interested in doing the same thing. Um,
We'll have to see how it goes. And
yeah, yeah, I'm really interested because yeah, it would just be perfect. I think I think all the schools should do it personally or yeah.
yeah, and have enrollment forms in the different languages so
Yeah.
that people understand what it is, really understand what it is
Yeah.
um, they're filling out, and the details about the school. But yeah, there's lots to it, and we'll see we'll
Yeah.
see where it all leads.
Oh, well, good luck. And shall we catch up maybe after the submission day or when we're underway
Yes,
next yeah, in the next thing to see what we're both doing and how it's going, if that's okay. I'd
that
really
sounds like
like
a really
to.
good plan. Let's do that, because it's due in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we
Um,
can.
so yeah, after that, and then I think then there'll be a bit of a focus on C3 catching up, and then so perhaps even if we looked at about maybe July, might
Sounds
be
like a good
underway in
plan.
July, and we
Yeah.
could kind of perhaps if we manage to see if there's a date in July that we can fix well ahead, and then
Yes,
study
I'll send you an
time.
email, Jenny.
Yeah, because if it's to study leave, it'll be easy as, won't it? But yeah.
So are you in central Auckland?
Yes,
Where,
Waterview.
where do you, where do you live?
So Waterview, it's like kind of where
Right.
if you come in on is it the 20, State Highway 20? Do you come along that airport one?
Um, Not usually. I normally come up the southern motorway, but
Oh,
I
okay.
know.
Yeah, if you come up the 20 and then you go in the tunnel, we're at the other end of the
Yep.
tunnel. It's the Waterview
Right,
tunnel. Yeah. So how about you?
right.
Where are you?
In Pukekohe.
That's right, Pukekohe. So you're a little bit
Yeah.
out, a little bit outside of the city.
Yes, yes. So we're still classed as Auckland, but we don't
Yeah.
really think that we're there, if you see what
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Have
Nice.
you always lived there in Auckland? Did
All
you come?
West Auckland. I was more west, but yeah, I
Right.
went to Hastings for a year and came back here. This is much easier because I'm more central and I can get on the motorway easily and just
Yeah.
not the 20 because we're on top of it, but like is it the 16 that comes off the one that comes all the way down west? I don't know if you know
Right. Yeah.
one. Yeah, yeah, but you're good for Hamilton and places. I'd love to live with not have to
Yes, yes.
get
Not,
getting out
not
of
that I tend to go
no.
to Hamilton. It doesn't take
No,
too
no.
long. It doesn't take too long to get into the city. We're going up. My daughter's a volunteer firefighter, and she's doing the Sky Tower walk tomorrow with all her breathing stuff
Oh,
on. And we're going up there, and it take 45 minutes to get there. So it's not
yeah.
too bad.
That's not too bad. No, no.
No.
We have to face that getting out, and often it's a queue. If it's like Friday night, because I like to get
Yeah,
down to Hastings, and it's that trip. Like I said, I put on a good hour or two just to get out of Auckland through
yeah,
South Auckland. Yeah, so it'd be nice not.
absolutely. And
Mm,
that would be absolutely the same for me if I've got a day in Auckland and it's a work day. Getting through South Auckland to Pukekohe is a nightmare.
yeah.
Anywhere from sort of Takanini to Pukekohe is at a standstill, really. So
Oh,
yeah,
similar.
too
Yeah,
many people living in
it's
in
very
one
busy.
area.
It's got worse as well, hasn't it? Recently, a lot
It
worse.
has got
Yeah.
worse. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh well, look, best of luck with
Thank you.
C4. I look forward to talking to you. Have you started your story visualization yet?
Not yet. No, in fact, that's the bit I haven't really. Yeah, that's the bit I've got to hurry up and do. Yeah. Have you started yours?
I have. I used an image of a koe tree for Pukekohe.
Yeah.
Um, and I've used the branches and put my ideas on it, and then I've got my barriers underneath, and then the foundation with the marae. And yeah,
Okay.
it was actually quite an enjoyable process, and I'm not very creative, so
I'm not. So my somebody at work is going to help me with Canva or something. So she's going to help set up the illustrations, and then we'll put the writing on because it's not me at
yeah,
all. So yeah.
yeah. No, that's good. It's good to have somebody to help.
Yes. Yeah. And new learning, I guess, but I try to
All
avoid
new learning. Yeah, yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, good luck with it all,
And
and
to
I'll
you. Yeah. And it'd be nice to
um
see how it's going.
wonderful. So you'll send me the link
Yeah.
from this
So
meeting.
sort of whenever the holidays are, perhaps after the holidays. I think they're in July, aren't they? So after the school holidays in July, perhaps when we get back to work.
Yep, yep. I'll send you an invite for that, but will you send me
Oh,
the link for today's
oh, for
meeting?
today's thing. Yeah, I don't know if I can YouTube it, but I'll do what I can do. I'll see what I could do rather.
I I I I Googled how to do that and it did
Oh,
work.
okay. Thank you. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I've got daughters. Hopefully, they'll help me. But yeah,
Yeah. They're wonderful, aren't they?
they are. Thank
Nice
you
to
so
see you.
much.